Can you start by sharing the story of when you were 10 years old?
Oh, that story.
And you were watching the Academy Awards, the limos, the glam, and then they announced that Sidney Poitier wins the Academy Award.
I was sitting on a linoleum floor, and as I think about it, I can feel the linoleum, and watching on a Magnavox black and white TV, and Sidney Poitier getting out of a limousine is the first time I've actually seen a black man getting out of a limousine and nobody was dead. And so that got my attention. And then he wins. And I don't even think I knew at the time what an Oscar was, because it wasn't like I was 10 years old in Milwaukee, and it wasn't like I was watching movies. But standing there watching him receive the award is the first time I had the thought, because we were called colored at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had the thought that if a colored man could do that, if he could do that, I wonder what I can do.
For Oprah Winfrey, this early memory was a turning point and ultimately inspiration to produce a new documentary about the man who became her mentor and friend, called Sidney.
You think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man.
Sidney Poitier was raised on Cat Island in the Bahamas by his parents, who were tomato farmers.
The world I knew was quite simple. I didn't know there was such a thing as electricity, or that water could come into the house through a pipe. I never thought about what I looked like. I didn't know what a mirror was.
Poitier moved to the United States at 15, with no blueprint for the racism he'd face when he arrived.
I just go, how did he do it? How did he, with no role models, with no template before him, and he made a path for all of us.
Oscar-nominated producer Reginald Hudlin directed films including Boomerang, Marshall, and now Sidney.
Particularly as a filmmaker, what did he mean to you?
Well, he meant so much to me as a man. I mean, besides my father, he was the template of what manhood was. The intelligence, the courage, the intensity, the discipline, the moral compass.
Integrity.
We can just rock them all day.
Yeah, rock them all
so
day.
many words that sum up the measure of a man. And that was just kind of in my DNA. I wasn't fully conscious of it until I started making the movie. And I was like, oh, that's what he means to me. Of course, I know his importance as an actor and how he transformed popular culture on a global basis. I knew when he became a filmmaker and he had the most successful black film ever made, Stir Crazy, a record that held for 20 years. I was very conscious of that.
Which is still one of the funniest things ever.
Ever.
It's one of the funniest things ever.
Right. And a guy who is known for being an amazing dramatic actor who turns out to have an amazing talent for comedy. The talent and the breadth of skills keep growing and growing and growing.
Quincy Jones had a 42nd birthday party for me. Sidney Poitier was there. And I remember going downstairs, turning a corner, and he was just standing there. And I froze, because here's my hero.
Not everybody gets to meet their heroes.
Not everybody does. And most importantly, most of the times when you meet your heroes do not measure up. In this case, he exceeded every measurement I ever could have imagined.
How did he make you feel?
What he was able to do, as you will hear from anybody who's ever known him, is that he made everybody who was in his presence feel like they were the most important person he'd ever been with. And he had a deep curiosity and love of human beings, period, no matter who it was he met. You couldn't be out to lunch or dinner with him where he wasn't speaking to the waiter, or he wasn't asking to see the chef, or going into the kitchen and talking to the people. He had that quality about him that everyone was seen and felt in his presence. But what he made me feel was something, when I met him, was something beyond anything I can even describe in an interview. I mean, I believe that we were soulmates. We used to talk about the fact that we certainly had met in another universe at another time.
For Sherri, Anika, and Beverly, 3 of the icon's daughters, he was just dad.
For all 3 of you guys, what was it like for you guys as children to see such adoration for your father. Were you aware of the magnitude of his impact, or was it when you got a little bit older?
Okay, I mean, this is going to sound terrible, but, you know, it was very annoying because we couldn't go anywhere. You know, we would go to Disneyland and people would stop you every, you know, few feet. Oh my God, is that Sidney Poitier? Yeah. So my sister and I, we were in the back and we were really kind of tired of this. So this lady said, is that Sidney Poitier? And we said, no. People always think that. And he heard us and he was livid. He said, it is because of women like that and those people that we're here today. You don't disrespect them. And, you know, that was like, oh, okay.
I think I knew always what he did, and I knew that because people would constantly say, do you know how lucky you are to have a father that you have? And so I had an idea, but I didn't until I was older have any understanding of the impact that he had on so many people.
I used to think that he was God because he knew so much. And I would look at him and say, man, how do you know all these things? Really? He would tell me how many stars there were in the sky. Well, who told you? You know, I was like, the way every dinner time we would sit around the table and just listen to what he had to say because it was fantastic. Oh my God, it was wonderful. I would say, we've got to be home for dinner.
Wow.
Oh yes, had to be home for dinner because I wanted to find out what Daddy was going to talk about.
I was watching some of his films and rewatching some of his films, particularly Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And I just lost my grandfather. He was 98 years old, and they were about the same age. They were about 3 years apart. And my grandfather was a physician. And I remember my grandmother would show me these pictures of my grandfather dressed to the nines, so honorable, so kind. And so I remember watching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and there's the scene where he's in this suit. And I pulled up a picture of my grandfather at that same time. Where he's in a suit. But I think for me, there were so many men who lived so honorably, Black men, and not just necessarily physicians. And I thought about perhaps, you know, for the first time, he finally was able to see himself projected on the big screen, and men like him, and there were so many of them, you know, and they weren't diminished, they weren't devalued, they were able to keep their heads up. We know what that meant, and also for whites to see that on the big screen. Can any of you talk about the importance, finally, of seeing that representation?
You know, you look at the history of cinema, from Birth of a Nation on, all these horrific images that demean and diminish Black humanity. And suddenly, he emerges, fully formed from the very beginning, with the intelligence and the intensity and the courage and the class and the elegance and the moral compass, everything that he is. And he makes the right decision every time. He picks the right role. He plays it right. He refuses to do anything that diminishes himself or anyone that looks like him, anyone that he represents. And he does it for decade after decade after decade, and he never makes a mistake. It's an impossible achievement.
And then when he gets behind the camera, he brings other Black people behind the camera in.
Open the doors.
Open the doors for so many others.
And I stand here as a grandchild of his. You know, and all my peers today, actors, filmmakers, all of us, we all stand on the shoulders of Sidney Poitier. But it's much bigger than entertainment. Please don't.
Oh, we'll get there. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't have Barack Obama if you don't have Sidney Poitier.
Oprah, you talked about the scene in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner where Sidney's character told his father, let me read this, you think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man. And you went on to say that defined Sidney Poitier.
One of the reasons, one of the multitude of reasons why I have such admiration, love, and respect for him is because he came to the United States by the time he was 15 as a fully whole human being. There was no hole to fill in terms of his own identity. And one of my favorite stories that he tells in the documentary is about not even knowing what color he was or what color was until he was 10 years old, because he didn't even know what a mirror was. He'd never even seen himself in the mirror. And so, as is the case with a lot of people who are raised in all black countries or all black communities where race is not an issue, and you literally are defined by the content of your character. And the content of his character was established by his parents. I mean, there's nothing you can read or hear or any story that's ever told about him that is not grounded in Reginald and Evelyn Poitier.
There's also a part in the documentary that takes us to 1967, 1968, this time of civil unrest. Did he ever talk about what was that like when things are spiraling literally around him and he's this Hollywood star?
There's always that question. Do the times make the man, or does the man make the times, right? And, you know, the answer is always a little bit of both. So here is this revolutionary force that's transforming Hollywood, that's transforming political activism. He's all these things at once. He's carrying the entire transformational moment on his back.
Because he's carrying it on his back because he's the one that we see. He's the one that's visible.
He's it. And he's willing to take the burden, right? Which is not a small thing. And he knows he can't just be it on screen. He has to live it in his life. He's doing this. 1967, he's the #1 box office star on the planet Earth. He has a triple, 3 movies that come out in the same year that I don't think anyone has ever matched. To Sir with Love, In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, all in the same year. And at the same time, The Defiant Ones is playing on TV. So he owns 1967. He is the symbol of all the transformation, the inflection point in this country. And in 1968, everything changes. We lose Martin Luther King. You know, he has all these terrible losses in his own life. He and the culture who he's leading now moves ahead of him. But they don't. Because the reality is he has a moral center and he has a value system which is classic, which is why it's important to tell the story. When we really say, okay, let's take a look at what this man did from a historical perspective, you go, he was always right. He was always the leader. And there's so many lessons that today we need to learn from him.
Yeah, and his integrity is inflappable and infallible. You cannot deny that he has lived the most extraordinary life because of his value system. It's the way he operated and the way he carried himself. And this sense of elegance and presence that everybody talks about was not an external thing, because he didn't view himself as a movie star. He considered himself a man and a father, first and foremost.
Did it come with the weight of pressure? I know at times he talked about feeling lonely.
It's always hard being the first. When you're the first to do anything, people are coming at you from all sides. And in the case with him, black people are coming against you, white people are coming against you saying, how dare you, who do you think you are, who do you think you are? It's one of the reasons he and I connected so well. In our very first meeting, I had a conversation with him about, what do you do with all the criticism and trying to be everything for everybody? And he said, my dear, it's challenging when you're carrying other people's dreams. Yes.
You know, I do want to sing your mother's praises for a second. The story that got me, Beverly and Sherri, was when your father bought your mother a mink. And she chose to, take that, return it or whatever she did, but invest it, right, into A Raisin in the Sun, and becoming, in fact, the largest investor on Broadway. We know how successful it was. We know what it meant to your father. But how about that, even at that time, to invest?
Well, when she was at Columbia, before she married Daddy, she was studying accounting.
Yes.
And she grew up
Makes
in
sense.
Alabama, Bridgeport, Alabama, and her grandmother was kind of like the leader of the town, because she made sure she found out how to get school buses for the kids so they didn't have to hop the train. So, I mean, she was always involved in that kind of stuff. She's always involved in, organizations and helping people and NAACP and all that kind of stuff. So that's just who she is. And, today she would do something like that.
Well, long before it was a phrase on a t-shirt, he was clearly a loving girl dad. So what do you remember about your dad growing up?
Well, I remember we used to travel a lot. We'd be in a hotel room and bored, and so we would dress him up. And we would put makeup on him and do his hair with bows and barrettes, and then we would call room service and order food and make him go to the door and answer it.
Oh, no!
It was just pure fun with his kids. It was just genuine and loving, and he loved to just make us laugh and giggle.
I love that. You know, it's funny, you know, I come from a blended family, and the same thing with my father. He wants to make sure that each of us feel his love. And that was so clear with your father as well. Did you feel it even individually?
Yes. I had a party. I was 16 or something, and he was in Europe. It was a good party. It's dancing and everything. And around, 9 o'clock, 9:30, Mommy says, you have a phone call. And I was like, oh, okay. The party's over. What?
From Europe.
Yes. And I'm like, where are you? And I said, Daddy, it's only 9:30. He said, the party's over. I hung up the phone. I said, he's in Europe. What is he going to know? 15 minutes later, I hear people. I was like, I can't catch a break. I mean, no matter where I am, what I do, he's there. He knows what I'm doing, As long as he was around, I was going to be safe. Mm. I drove from New York to Texas when I got married the first time, and I was scared to go through the South. And I told Daddy, I said, I'm kind of scared to drive down there. He said, you'll be fine. And for me, it meant, he must have hired some people to follow me.
Mm-hmm. So Lenny Kravitz said this quote, and I wrote it down because I liked it. It says, he came to this earth to move it. Beyond acting, he went on to direct and produce, start a production company, and he opened doors for so many others.
When you read his biographies, you see, just as in the life of any famous person or people who've done great things in the world, most people don't start out, and neither did he, to say, I'm going to do great things in the world. I'm here in the world to move it and to shake it. I think it is the force of his being. It is the will of who he decided he was going to be as a man that allowed him to do all of the great things. And it is his innate sense of love for himself and love for his family that he was able to exude, that literally comes from the core truth of who he is and was as a man, that we saw expressed in the world. So through his art, we got to see who he was as a man, who he was as a father, who he was as a husband, who he was as a friend. But all of that, really, the reason why the love is so deep for him, for me, and I think for all who cared for him, is because we know that was real. Mm-hmm. That was real. That wasn't just some external star power people were looking at. That was the real man.
Mm. I talked about just losing my grandfather. Mm. And I remember towards the end knowing that there would be a time where I couldn't just call and he would pick up the phone. And now I miss the conversations. Tell me about your day, and he would just listen. What do you miss?
I miss him so much now, and I know we all do, but I miss him because of these times. I mean, I used to talk to him and I just feel like he would be able to help all of us sort out these times. Yes, make some sense of it. So I miss our phone calls. Yeah,
I do too. I just miss calling or picking up the phone and it's Daddy, and we start talking, and we talk quite a long time about different things, and the cosmos, as he was very much into. Yes. He was very much into the stars and the planets and what was going on, and he told me
the forces
time,
and the forces.
He said, I think I could just live out my days going into space, into like a spaceship, and just live out my days. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, but
I'd say let's go.
He was just like, no, he said he was going. Sherri, you're not going. But
I think he would have actually, taken one of those trips.
Yes,
he would have done
definitely.
it. Yeah.
I miss Oh, it's gonna make me cry. I miss hugging him. And sometimes I can still there's like a muscle memory. You can still feel the person, even though they're not here.
You're gonna make me cry. Sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, I miss hugging him, and I miss this, he was very silly. And, it's the little things that I miss, the weird exercises he would make up to do to stay healthy, that did nothing for him, I miss talking to him. I still talk to him, but it's the physicalness, I think, is the hardest for me. Like not being able to go and see him or hold his hand or, get that look that everything is going to be okay.
Right.
It's calm down. It's fine. Those are the things.
And Sherri, what about you?
His laughter. Oh,
I love it.
when he clapped his hands and fall out and oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, I just miss his laughter.
Do you still feel him?
Every day. Every day.
How often do you think of him?
I mean, all the time. How do I not think of him? It's, he's in everything that I do. He's in my children. I see his laughter. My son has his laugh. It's like, he's still so present.
Yes.
Right.
I thought it was so interesting, Beverly, when you were saying that you had a chance to see the documentary, and even for you as his daughter, to see his life play out.
I watched it and I knew the story, I knew all of the things, but it's like you hear people say so often, he changed the world, he made life, places better for everybody, he was so this, he was so that, and I kept watching it and wanting to recognize or feel what everybody else saw, but to me, he's always going to be daddy. Exactly. He's just always going to be daddy. The person who does it the right way, who expects you to do it the right way, and the person who wants you to be honest, the person who is making sure that he represents his family well. And I think that he instilled that in us. That you have to, you're not here by yourself. You can't run around and do stuff and just be insulated. Whatever you do ripples through. So my father was a great man, and it was just, watching the movie, it was just like an amen after a sermon.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh. And I will say that it's a testament to what you guys did, because it is the essence of him. You guys captured the essence of him in the film. And
that was the goal. That's such a compliment, because that was the goal.
That was, yeah.
That was the goal.
I was hoping to make the final gift to all of us, because he meant everything to all of us, whether you knew it or not. And we can now share some of those amazing lessons we all learned, so we can all benefit.
You made him proud. When you hear his daughters say that you captured their father, how does that feel?
We said from the beginning, when we sat down to talk about what we wanted to do, so you all honor us so much with your words, because our intention has been fulfilled, because the family just told us exactly what we wanted to do. And the intention was an offering. He used the word gift, and I said, it's an offering to the world, so that the world can come to know him as we do. And so the world can see the best of themselves reflected in the best man I have ever known. He is the best man I have ever known, heard, read about. I don't know anybody more extraordinary than Sidney Poitier.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.